5, it was only 700. But then I'm not sure that I'll be able to,
Yeah, I'm kind of,
put
No, done to last rules. Pretty
who's the other?
Then people,
Hello.
you just did it too long. Yeah, take this, as I have on the property, on road or something.
This, yes, section of, I can sit over there. if you want.
No, people over there. Now you got it back.
Okay, I think we'll get started. This is a workshop, not a regular select board meeting, so it's a little more informal. And I think we'll start with the finance committee's present, discussion of the capital. So before we start, I just want to be sure that the select board got the information that John and Chip had, well, Chip just handed part of it out just now. But also John had sent a summary, 3 or 4 days ago?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I sent a summary to Vika to update this
And
draft of the budget.
on Friday, and when I emailed the select board, in the email, the attachments were there. And there was also a link to the folder and the budget folder where they exist.
So everybody should have the updated fiscal year 27 third draft of the budget, and the budget should say 3/20/26 on it. Everybody got that or access to that? Okay, and then the information from the finance committee on the capital stuff came in a couple different ways, but it should be this multicolored spreadsheet, and then John had sent us sort of a summary that Vika incorporated into the budget. Does anybody have any questions about what we're looking at before we get going here? Everybody have it, including the public? You probably don't have this spreadsheet.
Is that yours though?
I have another copy.
Thank you for that.
So the name for this fiscal year, I think it's the 26-27 budget.
No, we call it fiscal year 27. Takes a couple of years to get used to that.
But it's
Yeah.
26,
Uh,
27. So, I mean, I figured it out eventually.
this budget is fiscal year. Well, I mean, it doesn't
What
say anything on
document are
it.
you asking about? I
The
guess?
title says 2026-27 budget.
It is 26-27. It's, so the budget is 26-27. It will be July 1st, 2026, and it will end June 30th, 2027. And you always refer to it as the greater year, so fiscal year 27 budget is what we're discussing.
I kept looking for the 27.
Okay, sorry, it's our fiscal year because it splits the calendar year, that's what. So I think finance committee, I don't know if you have anything you want to start with, or if you want us to start with questions or whatever.
Well, we could just acclimate people, so I'm 95% sure the information on the colored sheet in front of you is the same as what's in the third version of the budget. So you can look at that colored spreadsheet, or you could look at the budget. If you look on the budget, on page 20, it is debt service. So the two pieces, the finance committee provided two major inputs to the draft of the budget: debt service and recommended capital reserves. So, and we'll have to come back to debt service, I'm sure. But the only two projects that the finance committee thought might need to be funded in fiscal 27 were Wharf Road, because there's been discussion about the improvements to Wharf Road being done in fiscal year 27, and South Shore Drive. So if you look on page 20 of the drafting budget, Eka put in at the bottom, Department 6555 deferred debt service, and it shows Wharf Road 45.5 and South Shore Drive. Looks like, hopefully that's 14,000. It's missing a zero, but that would be a half a year of debt service. You know, because we're probably not gonna have to pay for the projects starting July first. But we can come back to that. And then on the colored sheet are recommendations for addition to the reserve account.
That's,
I'm just trying to get the.
that's page 35 on the
Page
budget.
35. The internet doesn't keep up with me.
Nobody can keep up with it.
Okay. So, well, the page is loading, I can talk about it. So the numbers that are recommended for, reserves came, a lot of the base information came from the dashboard that Andrew has created that's based on existing assets and replacement plans that departments and committees created for those existing assets. Right, so that's the base numbers that were there. Or they came from, capital improvement request forms that committees filled out, like the Coastal Waters Committee, filled out a plan, that had 3 priorities on it. And, they got comfortable that 50,000 was enough for fiscal year 27. And then the next item we recommended was the fire department reserve of 85,000. And that's simply replacement of existing equipment. It's, the first 2 fire trucks, we think we're gonna need to bond because they're not many years away. But there's two fire trucks that are 10 or 15 or years out. And in that they cost 500,000 now, they're gonna cost a lot more in 10 years, and you have to start putting a lot of money away. So there's a couple fire trucks in that 85,000. There's a Jaws of Life. There might have been some radio equipment, but it's on the dashboard and it meets the needs of the departments and it's been reviewed with the fire department. Building and facilities account 9030. Well, all that was in the dashboard was, I think it's $22,000. And that was replacement of something, a few years out. We heard from, having attended a couple of, facilities committee meetings, and, the facilities committee made a presentation to the select board. And what I heard from David Bruner was for fiscal year 27, they think they need $50,000 to keep moving the project along. So I added 50,000 in that 9030 account, and maybe that isn't where people would prefer to have it. But some of the funding for the work they did this year came out of 9030, I believe.
Can you give us a breakdown of the 149,810?
Yeah,
And it could be in bigger buckets than each individual one, but it's
6:09 p.m.
it's a big increase over what we've done historically. So what is it that's in there?
22,000 driven from existing equipment,
Yeah,
50,000 to support work on the public service building. And the balance is, additional funds that we put there.
like,
Just to use up our targeted amount, the targeted amount we set for the capital reserve budget.
so you're saying that 100,000 in round numbers is just money in facilities?
75,000 was put in that account. It doesn't have to be there for fiscal year 27, but if you don't put it in this year, It might not be there to go in year 3 or 4 or 5.
But there's no specific,
No,
but,
No.
but are you saying there is a, um. There's an indication that there's a need to replace facilities related stuff that needs to be budgeted at a rate of 75,000? I guess I'm confused as to
I
where,
understand, yeah, but chips.
Hang on a second, isn't that what we had, they had talked about, needing things for the facilities as a new roof and. then-
Yeah, so last year there was discussion about roofs and septic systems, et cetera.
And
And
furnace.
there's been some general conversation around, we don't really have a good plan to an understanding of when the roofs need to be replaced. So this account, 9030, covers all the existing town buildings and capital repairs and capital improvements to those buildings. So,
There weren't any requests put in, but this is what we had a carryover from last year that we had learned last year, but there weren't any requests actually put in for those amounts. But we felt that you should have money in there for a septic roof or furnace.
so that's money that can be moved around. But at
okay,
the end
so
of,
I,
at the
but,
end of the day, the finance committee is saying, we're recommending that the town put away 746,000 somewhere in these reserve accounts.
I get that, it's sort of, maybe I'm thick. Does the asset list that you've put together, related to facilities? Is that generating that number, or is it really just a number?
No,
Okay,
It was just, we had money left over and we said, this is a broad category because it covers all these assets. And it's also been used for new projects. So I think there's a lot of flexibility in the 9030 account, the way we understand it, to use that money.
so what new projects has it been used for?
I think it was used for the public service building work this year.
Money for public, $17,000.
Okay, well, and I guess, I was at the Capitol meeting or the fire department. I didn't hear a request for 50,000. I haven't seen, so have they submitted a form with a request for 50,000?
No, not to my knowledge.
And is there any backup for the number? I mean, where
Well,
did that?
it was a David Bruner number and he had it in the minutes from the
Okay.
facilities committee. Liza Jane might have heard some details.
But I mean, it's not based on a quote from Port City or whatever.
No, it's not.
Okay, so I think, so basically what I'm understanding is 22,000 is carried forward from other types of asset replacement costs. You have 50,000 in there for, I assume that's like design work for the public safety building, is that what that is?
Yeah, I think they talked about maybe doing
Site work.
Engineering.
soil testing and that type of thing.
And then 75,000 in round numbers for, facilities related needs,
Right,
okay.
right. If a septic system fails, if you need a roof or whatever.
We had a quote for the roof somewhere.
And the balance in that account right now,
145. There's 80 in there. Oh, geez.
Then the color sheet was supposed to have been updated.
Oh, no, sorry, 45, you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry, wrong color.
Yeah.
so on our sheet, that is, so it's 145 point, yeah. 145, 673.
Can I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Yes, you may.
Beyond. John, you said you had money left over and you referred to a target amount. So can you talk a little bit about the idea of, where, how you drive the target?
And we talked about that in our presentation in January, and I think we talked about it the last time we were here, but last year. The total capital spending, it's on the blue sheet.
It's on this big sheet.
Uh.
Yeah. Yeah.
On line 44, 45. Last year, capital spending on bonds was 455. The capital reserve contribution is 772, and that made 1.227.
And we inflated that by 3%.
Right, we think because 3% is an average figure for the cost of everything going up. We used that and we said, okay, what would an allowable target be to prevent any rapid spikes or increases? Obviously, that can happen because of bonding, but that's so unknown at this point. So that's when we came up with that number. The rest of the numbers are there. And so our reserve additions this year were actually 805, and we had a target of 808. The 3% is just to say you have it, that you assume that everything's going up, that we're gonna have to replace or do, and so it was seemed like a reasonable thing.
Right, and so the modeling we did, or the projections we did relative to the ability to bond $10 million new, started from that target. And if you inflate from that target 3% every year out over 10 years, and then you look at the starting reserves, it fits tightly.
Yep,
Thank you.
One other thing, I see two missing numbers between page 35 and your colored sheet. The total of the colored sheet, if I'm reading this right, is 805, 810. The total in page 35 is 746, 310. And it looks like, I just kind of went through it quickly, it looks like 9015 Stone Wharf, 45, 500 is missing out of the budget document.
Yeah, so the difference is, that on this document, there's 45.5 for the stone pier. That appears in two places. It appears as debt and it appears as reserve. So this is potentially overstated by that 59.5.
It was, and we had,
The trooper 9195.
it was a difficult thing to decide because if depending on, so the question is next year, do you have to bond those two things? We don't know. So we thought it was prudent to say, well, let's set aside 50% of what a bond would be. And where do we put it? We put it into a reserve account, which then feeds that bond, like Stone Wharf. So if you had to go with paving, which is part of the reserve description, so there's money. So that was basically what we decided recently. So we should put that money somewhere rather than say that it might happen. If next year you needed that money for a bond payment, where would it be? So it wouldn't be in the capital budget here, it would be in here in the reserve account and also for the storm damage for South Road. There's just no way to know when those would bond out, but we thought it was prudent to put some money for that.
No, I get the strategy there. So you're putting it in the reserve account and anticipating a bond in fiscal year 27 or potentially later. I think one thing is with this South Shore Drive, we will have a better handle on the number that the town may have to derive before town meeting, hopefully. I mean, I think that's the plan. So GEI is trying to get us an estimate.
And also, if they weren't used next year, those two are the most active of the reserve account. The Stone Wharf is gonna have tons, need tons of money as the storm damage and repair coming up. So it seemed like it was a safe place. It was connected to possibility of bonding, but it was also a safe place that would, if it didn't happen next year, it certainly would be used somewhere else during some kind of work, design work or whatever. So that's what it was here.
So the two things on the colored sheet, the two bonds are the 45,500 for the Stone Wharf and then South Shore Drive, which shows up under storm repair. as 14,000. Everything else is sort of a reserve.
Said something for paving. The what, did you say something for paving?
Well, I'm talking
We
about
didn't get the paving.
these are allocations that are really for potential bonding.
So on.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So right now, or in the past, and how I did it this time around is, the way that I read it is, it was, this debt, which is 59,500 in combination,
Right.
would be with the intent that that was gonna be bonded, that we would have to pay, which would historically go under debt service in the regular budget, not reserve account. So what I will need clarification from the select board ultimately is if that's where that money is gonna go. And then whether we would be able to pull money out of reserve accounts to make a payment for debt service. That answer, I'm not sure about.
Right.
Because right now, the way that it is in the budget, it's designed to go under debt service, not reserve account. So if that money isn't used out of that particular line item in that budget, then it goes back into the undesignated funds as unused.
Okay, so yeah, I had a question on
Yeah.
that. If it's in deferred debt service and it's approved at town meeting with warrants for that debt. If the project is delayed out of fiscal year 27, that money, which is in the general fund, can't be used for that approved debt service?
So all of the, when you're looking at this budget. And you're looking at the departments, the department 6,900 debt services. Right now, the total number is $518,422 if the town approves that. The select board has the authority to expend that exact number and up to no more than 10%. If it doesn't get used, then that's money that it's either used by the end of the fiscal year or it's not, and then any unused funds roll into the undesignated fund balance, which is very different from the reserve accounts, which is why they have to be approved for description and use at town meeting, because once you designate money in those accounts, as long as the select board authorizes the town administrator to expend it, it could be used on rolling years. So for me to know where that $59,000 would be important to know in terms of, like you said, if there is a delay, is that money designated to those accounts or does it go back into undesignated fund?
So does anybody know, can money from a reserve account be used for debt service?
I think it would probably require a vote, a town meeting vote is my guess. And so in some ways, waiting until we need the debt service is instead of pre-authorizing it or I don't know, we can ask. But it seems like a cleaner way to go is when we need the debt service, because typically you don't pay for 6 months, right?
And it depends on which, we would be applying for the fall one, so it would be questionable whether it would even roll into. What you would do is you would at town meeting, you would ask to bond and get the authority from the town to be able to bond whatever that full amount you're bonding, go through that process. And then once you have a better idea of what those payments are, then you budget those numbers. So this you're kind of anticipating what it could be. And if it's setting money aside into the reserve, then that's one thing, but I would have to double check if reserve, for some reason, I have memory coming up with the broadband committee wanted to use reserve funds to pay for a bond bank payment, and my answer is remembering that no, that's something we could do. So, if that's the intent, then
We
I
gotta
recommend we look
figure
into it and.
Yeah, so if those dollars aren't gonna appear under debt service. we would recommend that they be used somewhere in the capital reserve.
Right, so we could put them in the.
Right.
And those two, aside from whether they were ever used for debt service, those two, stone wharf and storm damage are obviously gonna be huge. Huge needs in the near future. We did not account for, if you look at the capital, down, we wanted to look at existing debt and new debt. We just wanted to list it for the sake of listing it, but there are other storm damage items that are not listed in there. That I have somewhere, but Jenks Road and things that have to be taken care of.
Yeah, and I think one thing we've got to be aware of is, you know, at the end of fiscal year, this fiscal year, these balances may decrease in these reserve accounts. You know, once all of the expenditures are in. And so we maybe want to do a little prediction about kind of what the balances will be at the end. So that we don't get caught short in those, because, and I think we can do that. It's mostly the big ones. But for example, you know, the social or design work is happening and that money will come out of the reserve account and we'll get reimbursed. So that's not so bad, but like Stone Wharf, it's a 50-50 mix, so even if we could spend 150 and only get 75 reimbursed, so that would be a deduction, and we're probably getting close to that number. So I think that's the other thing. I guess and maybe it's because it's been my life for the past couple weeks, but if I had extra money, I'd be throwing it in the Stone Pier account. Probably, because I do think if we end up with some other match opportunities, we want to be sure we have the cash on hand.
Right.
So,
Well, we put 14 in the storm damage, it's not a lot.
right, so I think I agree with the philosophy of sort of allocating the money. You know how much you have and you kind of worked back from a $10 million bonding. My guess is that in fiscal year, it's pretty unlikely we're gonna need a bond to pay a bond payment in fiscal year 27. We might take out a bond, but actually having to make the payment might not happen in fiscal year 27. I think one thing we've got to resolve, and we haven't talked about, so we have paving related to the Stone Pier, paving related to Wharf Road, and paving related to paving. So kind of coordinating, figuring out, and I don't know the answer to this, kind of phasing and staging the paving so it's the most cost effective in terms of mobilization. The paving that you're doing on the roads is different than the kind of paving we'd be doing on the pier, probably, is that right? Yeah,
Yeah, different product.
and then the paving for Wharf Road, is that different than the other roads?
Well, it would likely be hot top, wouldn't it?
He was saying Mr. Wharf itself.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Right.
I misunderstood her question. She said Wharf Road and Stone Wharf,
So I guess that's a question.
those would be the same
So
product.
you made a comment in one of the capital meetings that it might make more sense to do Wharf Road and Stone Wharf together, so you mobilize once, yeah, it sort of makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a good question for all states.
Right, and I think it's a question for the engineering firm, because if that is the case, then Wharf Road but Wharf Road has no constraints on the timing unless the engineering has constraints. So, because it's all self-funded.
Yeah.
And so that would be a question for GEI, like, can we do them sequentially together? What is it different? It makes sense to do them together.
Did I make?
Go
Sorry,
ahead, Joe.
go right ahead.
And there also was something else that talked about being paving or gravel, which we hadn't heard about till recently, was the golf course parking.
That project does not even have a number attached to it right at the moment,
But
really.
What is it? I'm just curious.
It could be gravel, it could be paving.
No, but I mean, what's this, where is it, what it, you know?
It's in the GEI plan.
Oh,
It's been planned independently kind of along the way, so we've consolidated everything into one plan. We've been pretty focused on the wharf and gangway, sort of the real waterfront part, because that's fundable. And so that's what we focused on, and then Wharf Road is a totally separate element, could be done tomorrow, could be done 5 years from now. And then the parking, I think that's one of these questions about, where does the town wanna spend the money? And so to me, and we had an estimate for about $100,000 or maybe 150 for the gravel parking lot 7 years ago. So we really need an updated number.
but just a quick description of it, where is it?
It's the piece of property that the golf course has been in negotiation for what, a decade?
Oh, that's,
Basically, it's all golf carts.
Yeah,
oh,
with,
okay, I didn't.
Oh, yeah, so, but there's several hoops we have to jump through. Number one, the town doesn't own the property.
Yeah,
It would need to be rezoned. And then the reason it was recommended we take it out of the Stone Wharf project is because the permitting will be challenging on the shore for a parking lot. And if we'd have to zone it commercial marine in order to justify making it a parking lot.
Could I make a quick comment about debt service versus bond, reserve fund? Deposit. I agree, if the timing doesn't happen correctly on debt service, let's just say you think you're going to do the work on, something you wanna borrow money on, it gets delayed, that money goes back into the undesignated fund balance. That's bad news technically, but
Yeah.
you could
Just
then go to town meeting or a special town meeting and say to the people of Quebec, we need to take X amount out, to start this loan. But my preference would be, at least for tonight, moving forward, to aim at putting money into reserve funds, planning, and having easier access to.
Well, I agree. I think we should get an answer to the question that Vika, I think she's right. I think for broadband, this came up.
Yeah.
So I think we need to know. And to me, it goes back into undesignated funds and then we reallocate it for bonds, not a
yeah, well, and
crisis.
the other thing is, we have a recommendation that'll be reviewed at a future select board meeting where we're recommending that if undesignated funds get moved, they only get moved to a reserve fund or funds.
So not for bonds, so. Okay.
No, but you can tweak that when you review it, right?
I gotta believe it's just how you describe the account. The money can't be used for anything that's not in the description. You put.
But I do think there's a thing about not being able to have reserve accounts for bonds. Well, I don't know, we'll find out, okay?
That brings up
Yeah, we can talk to the bond attorney.
a question, if I handed those out just to see this, possible consolidation of accounts, which will help in instances like this, which account we put in, if we created these new ones, or we would rewrite the description? And that could include possibly for bond payments.
I think that's a question we need to get an answer to, probably from a bond attorney, and I think Vika can take care of that.
Okay,
So you wanna keep going on the reserve account recommendations? And
Yeah.
then I'm sure there'll be a lot of conversation after that. So the next one is paving.
Yeah.
And so Vika and Mark and Herb put together a capital request form that showed 2 years from now, we need pretty much $400,000 to do some paving. And so based on what was in the reserve account, and trying to get there over 2 years, originally, I think we had 149,000 in 90/50. Okay, so that's another place we put additional funds. So there's an extra 85 or $90,000 in paving right now that won't be used in fiscal year 27, but it'll be used by the end of fiscal year 28. So that to us was a priority place where we know we're gonna need the funds. And we'll just need to put away less money in future years.
So the total amount we need is 400,
Yeah,
okay,
or four.
and we have 80, this would bring us up to, oh, 3 something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
What's in
that-
there now is 85.
Yeah.
So that would bring you up to 325.
Yep.
And I was targeting to get back to what is probably gonna be a normal annual amount
Right,
of 85 or 90.
And just to, John made a point, just so in my own head, everybody, we all understand. We're trying to target a certain amount of capital expenditures each year. It's gonna be kind of a seesaw. Right now, you don't have as much bonding.
Right.
But when these things hit, the bonding is gonna leave less money for reserves. So we felt it was prudent to put as much away. That's one of the things in favor.
So then Public Works, the 108 is what was driven by existing equipment, replacing existing equipment. Where the department went in and said, here's the dates, here's the amount that they cost. And then we added 50,000 because there's discussion about leasing a front end loader backhoe. And we heard the number 50,000, although we haven't seen the capital expenditure request.
so can you tell me what's in that 108, that's money being put away to replace the
Yeah.
backhoe?
Not having the details,
Part of it is $50,000. It's listed in
Public Works.
in the notes on that sheet.
Yeah, so it says replacement of 2 backhoes, so is that? And then Polycaster, I thought we were paying for that out of the actual budget. You walked out just at the right time. Backhoe.
Next week, the select board is gonna have a discussion about, so currently there's 2 backhoes. Some of which a total of $13,000, so what? You're right, the town has 2 backhoes, both of which are gonna be recommended to be eliminated. And a plan will be proposed, to replace it with 1 backhoe. That will be paid over the course of the next 3 years, starting at $50,000. So the recommendation for $50,000 is that first payment. If you go into your select board folder for next week's budget or for next week's board discussion, there's already a memo and all the supporting documents in there for you to review as to what's gonna come next week. And the capital request form, I said I was gonna do on Monday morning before leaving on vacation, and I never did, so that's totally my fault, but thank you for adding that in.
Well, we remember.
That's fine.
So just so I understand though,
What else is in there?
yeah, cause I mean.
Okay, so there's a replacement of a 2015 Ford F-550 in 2036, so we need to put 11,008 away per
Okay,
year for that. There's a replacement of a 2022 truck with plow that's $5,500 a year. There's a replacement in 2048
wow,
of a New Holland tractor with a boom mower and a sweeper. And we need to put $11,000 a year away for 20 years for that. And then there's a replacement of another plow truck in 2035 that we need $18,000 a year for. And then there's a replacement of the Public Works furnace in 2031 for $7,000. So those.
$7,000 annually?
53,000 and
These are the numbers that Andrew takes care of, and then, so those came from his.
So it's basically a bunch of vehicle replacements and the furnace. And this would be the case where we're actually saving money ahead of time, so we don't have to bond these things down the line.
right.
So the only thing thrown on top of that is the 50,000. And this is a lease purchase you're talking about?
Yes, it's a lease purchase or the town, at that point can make a decision to trade it in for a different one, but that's a decision that isn't something that has to be decided until that 3 years is up and the town either owns it outright or exchanges it.
And I thought one of the backhoes was pretty new.
There's one blue one that's a New Holland, and then there are two that look like what I think of yellow tractors. Those are the two that are more or less out of commission.
Keeping the blue,
The blue one is staying, and so Public Works, has, through a lot of research, basically decided that they don't need the two. And the one will be functional, and so in the memo, it will describe, the reason behind the proposal, the research they did, the time that the other ones have been out of commission, and for you ultimately to make that decision, if that's something you move forward with. If you don't, then that $50,000 is
But either way, we need a backup.
correct.
And so is there any revenue that would be generated from getting rid of these two backhoes?
That's all in the memo, yeah.
and we talked about this, but I thought the lease was 40,000 when we talked about it last, estimated, am I correct? Initially?
I
No.
never heard of a $40,000 number.
No,
So I think,
was-
again,
yeah.
we probably need to take it up specifically in terms of decisions at the select board meeting, but this is an alternative to purchasing $150,000 backhoe.
Well, it is, and I just wanna make a point, because the word lease threw me a little bit, because most in today's, the word lease is associated with, you buy a car for 3 years, and then at the end of that, you have a chance to buy it out or whatever, which is always a difficult way to make a financial decision, because you don't know what the buyout, and they'll never tell you what the buyout will be. So this really isn't a lease, it's just financing, right? Yeah, at the end of 3 years, we own it,
correct,
so that.
Oh, okay.
yes.
So it's not it's just like, it's just financing. They're giving you 3-year terms, they're giving you some trade-in, and then at the end of it, like any
I
car,
recommend trip to it.
any car, once you own it at the end of it, you have the option to trade it in, so it's basically.
What the town is doing is they're, instead of having to fork over $150,000 upfront, $140,000 upfront, there is a little bit of interest, so the choice is being made to pay it over the next 3 years.
It's just
And then the machine is here in 4 to 6 weeks. But
And
the
so,
memo, it's like 2 pages, I
Yeah.
think that have a very clear understanding after looking at it.
so the advantage is we get a new machine. Under warranty, solid for 1 year, under warranty for engine for 2 years. The only thing we have to do is fluid and filter changes. At the end of 3 years, we own it. And we can decide to keep it, or we can decide to trade it in for another brand new machine. That will be under warranty for 3 years, 2 years, and 1 year. With the state of the machines these days, everything is electronics, hard to maintenance. That'll be a decision 3 years down the road. If you trade in a machine that has $110,000 value still to it. For another machine that only has, that costs $150,000. You're then finance that for 3 years for $10,000 or $15,000. But that's a decision for later down the road. This is a decision. Gets Public Works a backhoe for immediate use, immediate needs. It's brand new, it's not gonna be broken down. And we don't have to make the first payment until a year from now.
Technically, yeah, it does cost a little bit more that way, but.
Mark?
Yeah, I spoke with Tanner about this quickly, because you gave me permission to do so. And I'm comfortable with what's being described and listening to Tanner, and I think there's an incentive for these companies right now to offer financing situations like this, because the market's not extremely strong right now with some sales of some equipment. And this is a good way to one of the old backhoes is complete junk and the other one's heading in that direction quickly. We definitely need a one good machine, and I hope that we're going to be getting a ditching bucket with it. Thank you.
And the cost for a new machine is about $150,000.
$170,000.
All right, and we probably don't wanna dive too far into backhoes, but I think the strategy here is to solve the backhoe problem with $50,000 in the capital. Is that what we're at? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And I think one point I wanna make is recognizing that the rest of the money that's being proposed by the finance committee to add to this reserve account is to specifically set aside to replace the existing equipment, which is a process that I think the town has struggled with. So then that way, whatever the board is faced with it in the future isn't sitting there having to make a lot of the hard decisions. Because hopefully the prep is a little bit more advanced
Yeah,
and you've done the hard work.
I mean, I'm on board with, now that you have a replacement schedule, trying to save for that. So that makes a lot of sense. Thanks to the, finance committee for pulling that together.
So then the next item was recycling compactors, and that's replacing a compactor in some year, and 15.5 was the number to put away to make that happen.
Where is that, John? What,
Uh,
oh, I see it.
line item 9057.
And so you've got 15,000 in there,
Yeah,
15.5.
yeah.
And how much is a new one? And when would that be replaced?
I don't have that level of detail in front of me, man. I'm sorry.
The number that Andrew came up with was 13.6, and he has more numbers about where he came up with that, so we just rounded up a little bit.
Okay,
So it's different if you replace a motor, which we have,
last year.
is
That's like.
$3,000. If you have to replace the whole unit, it's kind of an unknown cost because nobody will give you a quote unless they come out and inspect it. With huge variables of barging, installation, and so on and so on. So it's going to happen. It's just pre-planning ahead of time. Because compactors, basically, they say they have a life of 10 to 15 years, depending upon weather and extreme conditions. Ours are always outside. They're not at a Lowe's or Home Depot where they're inside and warm and heated.
And we have 4 of them.
We currently have 4 compactors, yes. So this money could be used for either one of those 4 that break down.
But you don't have a lot of money in that account, 23,000, right?
And so up until a couple of years ago, money was not really put in that. And the town ran into the situation where on an emergency basis, it needed a new one. And I think it was Bo who recommended put money in it. And so every year the town has been putting a little bit, I think maybe $3,000 or something very minimal last year. So.
There's a column that says what went in last year, over to the left of the yellow column.
10,000.
Yeah.
So, okay. Any questions on the compactor? I mean, to me, it'd be whether or not we should put more money in there.
Then the next item was 9192, rescue vehicles and equipment. So that's ambulances and equipment. And, I don't know, a month ago, this was at, 38,000 or less. But you remember the stretcher conversation, and the stretcher was originally in the inventory for the firehouse, and we moved it to the inventory for the ambulance. So that 98,000 is basically saving for the next replacement of an ambulance, and 50,000 within the next year or so for a stretcher, and maybe that's right, I heard 50, I've now heard 40.
It's 40 to 50. And a new defibrillator?
And there's a defibrillator in there at some point in time too.
Those are going for, the one we have, replacement is 50,
Okay.
so.
So were capital forms submitted for those with estimates? Okay,
I think they should do that.
It was either filled out in, when they went through the inventory, or, and the one was filled out in stretcher, yes.
It's the first I've heard of the
Yeah.
defibrillator.
I would have
Okay.
given them to Andrew, he developed the number two.
yeah,
I don't wanna get too technical, but putting money like for the rescue, is that to replace, in our opinion, or their opinion, the newest rescue or the second rescue?
ambulance, you mean?
The newest.
The newest ambulance becomes the oldest ambulance when you get a new,
Replacement of the newest one,
correct,
planning for.
correct,
Thank
yeah.
you.
And it's because the stretcher needs to be compatible with the town of Yarmouth, okay.
Okay,
So, there is money in there that could be moved around. I think we heard that we ought to take the money that's currently showing up in the debt and move it into the reserve accounts.
probably.
But then there are probably some, this is a process that we're going through and we're all learning. And so on the capital, on this blue piece, the blue section, the Chip handed out, that's kind of a list of all the capital projects we know about. And we collectively need to do a better job in the process of being real clear on the priorities. And that's difficult, because if you look at this list, the fire rescue boat, I don't think anybody really heard about for the last 6 months. Sheriff's housing, we put on this list.
Yeah.
And that's a topic that got some energy within the last month. And then golf course parking. I was thinking that that was part of the Wharf Road plan in my mind, but.
We've broken, just so everybody, we've broken the Wharf Road project into 4 pieces. The pier, the gangway planks, the gangway ramps, the road, and the parking lot. And partly it's for permitting reasons that it's been broken up, some of it's for applying for grant reasons, there's different reasons, but there are 4 pieces, and currently we are representing the costs for 3 of them. The golf course parking lot would be anywhere from 100,000 to $500,000, depending on what we did. It's my guess, I'm just guessing. But GEI should be able to give us a pretty good range of those numbers by, in the next month or 2. But the timing of those is to be determined. And I think one of the things that, Wharf Road was sort of first on the list because we can't easily get grant funds for it. And also, I think it was partly because we wanted to show some progress. But, if it doesn't make sense to do it immediately, and it's better to wait till we do the whole thing, which probably is true, it's better to wait. We can explain that to people. I mean,
Carol, quickly on that, I would agree with that if it doesn't make sense. But I would still like to see the select board consider a recommendation of some additions to the reserve funds for Stone Wharf Road and future parking development.
and those are all in there's one Stone Wharf Reserve Fund, and those to me would all be captured under that fund, yeah. So you're right, we haven't really, well, the road, it's a bond, but there's money in the reserve, potentially in the reserve for that. And I guess one question I had looking at this, because for the fire trucks, I heard you say that, in other words, Andrew recommended 700,000, that would have pretty much killed the capital budget right there. And we're putting in 85. So how do you differentiate, or what's the thinking between what things we bond and what things we try to save for?
I think it depends on the useful life of the item, for one, and also the amount. It, kind of three criteria, the useful life of the item. The amount it is, because you might not be able to save that amount, like Wharf Road, you can't save that amount or put it into a reserve account. It's coming up soon. So Andrew, I don't think made a decision on whether you're gonna bond it or not. He just said, okay, if I have to
Right,
save the money, that's what I need a year. So I don't think there's a hard, whether to bond it, but I think that's in general what it is.
Yeah, we haven't established a policy to say that if something's over $300,000 and it's got a life of more than 20 years, you ought to bond it. Some towns might have something like that as a policy. I think the work you guys did a couple of years ago, with one of the towns you looked at that had that real sophisticated, Pownell
oh, Arnold's, yeah.
Powell had some kind of a rule like that, anything over 300,000 with a long useful life was bonded. But if you look in the dashboard, which is what Andrew created based on input from the departments. So the tax truck, I think I forget whether that's 350,000 or 500,000, but it's 500,000. If you needed it in 2029, which is potentially the year after the public service building could be here, you need to put away $187,000 a year. And then the next vehicle is the plan would be 2033, you need to put $90,000 away. So those numbers seem too big to us to try to be saving as we're going into the need for bonding dollars.
Yeah, but I think for that quickly, and John, you're right. Rough numbers, if we bond $500,000, we pay back $700,000 roughly. We borrow $500,000 over 20 years. If we borrow $1 million, we pay back 1.4.
Correct, right, but the other factor is if you're talking a 25-year bond
Like a 20-year bond.
or 20-year,
And I don't like 20-year bonds on vehicles.
no,
I just,
on fire trucks, they're okay, potentially.
We did a little research on that, and what you really have to look at is if it's a 20-year bond. You can say, yes, I'm spending X amount a year for 20 years equals that. But you have to do a future value
Right.
of payments, and you're actually paying it back in 15 years with money that's been discounted at 3% or whatever the inflation rate is. So I made a little comparison that if you're gonna bond, you can then do the math, and it has to be, it comes a little bit into how much you earn on your money and how much you pay for your money. So it's not always, it's not always more expensive.
It seems like a lot.
Yeah,
It's, if you can avoid that, great, if you don't have to pay interest, but you're paying it back with the future dollars are a lot cheaper than current.
It's like your mortgage
Because of
payment.
inflation.
When you bought your first house, you're like, oh my God, after 20 years, you're like, that's not so bad.
Right, so I think that, and to me, it's things like, things that have a short lifespan, like vehicle, like what Public Works has done is they're trying to save the money to do vehicle replacements that aren't huge ticket items. And, we saved the bonds because we did in the past bond a plow truck, and that seemed kind of ludicrous.
We're paying for it right now.
Right, and so to me, trying to save for those vehicles makes sense. A fire truck, maybe that's a
Well,
different.
so far, the only thing we've excluded are the 2 fire trucks we need the soonest. Because the numbers were huge. To save for.
To say for the just, it's,
And. Yeah, okay.
if you took Andrew's portal and when we did this sheet last year with all the assets. If you were to save for all the assets that were listed last year, you would have to put away $1 million a year, so I mean, whatever it was a huge amount. So we're just trying to find that seesaw and keep within a modest increase.
And one thing though that I sort of, when we met with the fire department, to me, there's sort of a difference between priority and timing. So priority doesn't always have to be the next thing you're gonna buy. There might be a higher priority item that's gonna come up down the line. So, you know, I think it's important to kind of distinguish between the two because in the decision-making process, and I agree, sort of prioritizing these things collectively we probably do need to think about that.
I use this in a priority of a decision matrix and something like this bodily harm. I mean, if as a criteria, I mean, if somebody gets hurt, if somebody can't get to an ambulance, if somebody gets run over at Bennett's Cove, you know, that's one criteria that,
Well, yeah.
personally I use it.
Right, I think also though that some of these larger projects are a high priority, but they can be phased. And so they, you know,
Absolutely.
that kind of thing. And even the public safety building, that's my understanding. This is a phased
What,
project.
yes, what's the portion of the public safety building that prevents bodily harm? And that's what you have to look, that's one way to look at something.
Okay. And so,
So it's with the process we went through and we're all learning. And we're gonna do things differently fiscal year 28. But yeah, we need to we're gonna make some improvements, but
It's gonna get better.
this is way better than last year.
But
So-
more colors.
but there may be some reserve accounts that really didn't get looked at by anybody. You know, so
Like,
that's
what?
one of the questions.
There's a lot of sleeper
Well,
cells.
for example, the stone wharf, you know, that, we've said that's a good place to put money, but. We need to have money for grant matching, and, you know, if all the grants came through, do we have?
We don't, if all the grants came through, which would mean that Congress would have to pass a budget, so don't hold your breath.
Yeah,
But if they all came through, we don't have enough money.
in there for matching funds.
Right.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't hold my breath on that.
About-
and does this include, if the gangways are separate? Does this include enough?
Just so everybody's on the same page, it's, the Stone Wharf project is $9 million, not including the golf course. Parking. So, that's the magnitude, and
And does
the
that-
wharf itself is 6.5 or almost 7, counting the design and everything, so $7 million just for the wharf and the gangway and all that.
Is two.
Yeah, and the Wharf Road is probably, it's a high estimate of 1.3.
I think so. Could I ask one quick question of the finance committee? After tonight, you will be recommending $772,000 of reserve account deposit plus $514,831 of debt and existing debt. Is that correct?
No,
No,
No.
That's not correct.
well, the five,
It's row 42,
is
Mark.
go up to the top there.
Sorry, yeah.
That 514 includes Wharf Road and South Shore Drive, new dollars, those are gonna come out. And then those dollars are gonna be added to the reserve accounts that are on this budget.
Okay.
And that, they're gonna add up to 805, 810.
But it's still targeting 1.28. For
1.264.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was a mistake.
That's all I was getting.
Well, yeah, if we tweaked that number a little bit too. This might be the first time we heard it. It went up by,
Well, I thought it was like
10 or
1, 2, 3,
15.
4, and I thought, is this just
I'm
a
just calling
fake
it
number?
1.3.
we estimate, so line 40, row 42 is the total reserve addition. And we estimate on row 56. That if on row 54, the state that was 33,810. Is the increase in reserve additions versus last year. When that is divided by a total tax base of 3.6 million, it's a 0.9% increase. That's on row.
Oh, so you're saying that the reserve additions total 808,
Right,
but I'm a little confused. Are we double counting the Stone Wharf and South Shore Drive? I mean, because it's showing up in the reserve additions, but also in the debt.
Yeah, we're gonna take them out of the debt, I think, based on tonight's conversation.
it's,
And move that $59,000 into the reserve, so the total reserve number,
It's already in there, right?
well, it's not. on the
It's not on the third draft of the budget.
No, but in your smart sheet, it's the 808
It
influence
includes
that,
that, yes.
which is a little confusing. So it actually shows up 2 places on the smart sheet.
Yeah, well, there's 2 guys that have been working on the
Okay,
smart
okay,
sheet.
I'm just asking.
We're working on smart.
So,
this is the kind of smart sheet.
so one of the questions, if say the finance committee proposes that undesignated funds are only used for reserve accounts, are we making any proposals at town meeting to apply undesignated funds to reserves?
Yeah, that was my.
That's another question.
Yes, yeah, so I have a list of questions that we ought to
Okay,
try to go through quickly.
all right,
Some of them are actually here in yellow, but, so are there funds needed in other accounts? So we talked about putting more money in this old water account potentially. The 90/30 account, which is building facilities. The definition says building facilities, renovation and improvements to town-owned buildings to include the town garage, sand shed, transfer station, and public safety building. Renovation and improvements to town-owned buildings. So that what has been used for public service safety building work this year. Is that the right place if we're gonna fund 50,000 to keep the public safety building work going on? Is that the right place to put it?
so I thought the very first Port City work was done, didn't they have a grant for that, or am I hallucinating? So Port City, we've had at least 2, you know, 2 contracts or whatever to Port City. There was the first one, then they came back this fiscal year for another 17.5. And so,
Now I remember, Port City was hired the first time around to do the design. It did come out of, this account, and then, it's the construction of the town office renovation where a good chunk of it was paid out of the ARPA funds.
right. So I think it was perhaps intended to be more construction related costs and maintenance, but I think we've used it liberally for Port City's costs. I don't know that it's a problem.
From my point of view, $50,000 to support in reserve for 4 buildings. Salt shed, transfer station, public work, public safety.
I think that number
No,
is,
No,
there's
that
a lot of-
$50,000.
That's just one item.
That
We put in-
$50,000 is being recommended specifically for the facilities committee to continue their work on progressing for the new fire station across the street, so that 50K would be allocated
Yeah, we're
for that.
recommending 140.
Yeah, total 22.
We're
So-
trying to build that account now. For the reason, based on your concern.
One of the problems that we had from what we knew was that, there, if we didn't put that money in there. The other alternative was to warrant, public warrant saying, do you wish to put $50,000 aside for a public safety building? If they voted it down, then that $50,000 would be lost if we tied it to that warrant.
Mhm.
If we put it in here, it's there for whatever. And it seems prudent because there's enough other things, the furnace and septic and all that stuff. So I don't know, I'd heard somebody say that they might only ask for permission as a warrant or ask for the town's opinion if they want to continue with the public safety building. You have the information that we're hearing is that on one hand, and on the other hand, the public safety committee, the building committee asking for hard cash. So I don't know.
So just the facilities committee's role is to provide opinion and advice to the select board. They don't decide what warrants they're gonna bring forward.
Right.
That's up to us. And at least in my opinion, I think what we need to look at is, how much have we spent to date on the design? And then, how much more do we need to allocate? Cause this number, it sounds very, out of the air. And I will tell you what happened on the stone wharf, and I don't want to repeat this. So, this is on the select board. We spent several years doing a design. The design was too expensive, and frankly, fire department already did this once. So we ended up with a design that we couldn't afford. So it's back to the drawing board, do it again, but we spent $150,000 doing that. It isn't totally lost and useless, but at the same time, I really think that the fire department or the facilities committee, and we did this for the stone wharf, needs to identify what the criteria is that they are trying to achieve with the building in terms of space, and money. I mean, I think particularly having a financial goal, it really changed the game on the stone wharf because we said not over $10 million. And that changed the whole, not changed, but really constrained the design. So I think that would be another place for the facilities committee. I mean, this is just me talking, the board needs to discuss this, but I wouldn't want to repeat the same mistake where we end up with a design that's kind of beyond our capacity and then we got to go back and kind of regroup. It's better to lay out like what's a financial goal. Just like when you're building a house, you're not gonna build a $750,000 house if your budget can only afford 500. So I think that's where, to me, that's where the facilities committee should go next.
And I think that that's important information for the facilities committee to hear, because they're still coming at it from the direction of ideas for what this building could provide for the town. And I think having some more clear guidelines for what the town could afford and what are those parameters, I think would be helpful for the facilities committee. So I'm the ad hoc select person on that board. I think that would be helpful information and guidelines to have.
So it's just one way the process could go. I think the
Yeah.
board needs to talk about that, but I think what we saw last from the facilities committee was a $2 million project. And so now I think it's up to 3.
It's up more.
So, and I think it might be that we work with the finance committee to try to kind of back calculate what's a reasonable range, given some of the other things we know. And so,
And the one other question that I have is, because the timeline for the facilities committee would be wanting to apply for CDS grant money. Not sure how that's gonna play out over the next few years, and would any of this, there's no planning right now with funds that could do a matching if that were to happen. So I think this is a big conversation for that committee. So if there were CDS funds available in the next few years that aren't being prioritized, for example, by the stone wharf, we would need to have some planning for those matching funds and giving the facilities committee a clear idea of not only what the ability is for the town for this project, but what kind of timeline can be offered for the public safety building.
but I mean, I would assume that the way we budget for these things is the actual cost of the facility, and if we get money, great. But I think we'd wanna project the cost based on
not getting
construction
funding.
costs,
And I
because-
think I think the facilities committee has been planning on being able to get funding, which I don't think is a secure way to look
Well,
at it.
certainly not a CDS.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, but I think we need to work with the facilities committee more on the process. I think
Right.
if in the last communication to the board, the timeline was construction of the building in 2029, $2 million budget. And we did give them sort of a go-ahead on that proposal. But it sounds like it's evolved since then, and so we probably need to regroup. But I think one of the places that, for all of these projects, because the transfer station strikes me as someplace that's gonna need some investment one of these days. I do think sort of coming up with ballpark numbers of like, you know, I really don't wanna go beyond this because, you know, that's gonna really be, if this is the timeline, it's either the timing or the money, right? So.
Right, and I don't think the finance committee can get real specific on that without taking the list of all the
I
capital
agree.
stuff and prioritizing that.
I agree.
And that kind of got teed up. It was a good conversation, the facilities committee, because should the sheriff's housing be part of the public safety building?
Right.
No, well, then the town ought to just, you know, build the sheriff's housing. And then it was said in the facilities committee meeting, a town can always find $500,000 somewhere in the budget. And then they asked me, is that true? And my answer was, absolutely. If it's the highest priority, you're gonna move other stuff out of the way. So.
Right, another option is to purchase a building for housing, like you suggested, you know, that is not an unrealistic option. So, I mean, I think there's other ways to answer the problem, but I think that the select board and the finance committee kind of need to get together on the process.
Well, and I guess one more thing, I think the facilities committee now. They're hoping there's 50,000 to keep the project going. And I think that they. Expect that there would be some type of a warrant in fiscal year 27 to show support. So that they could potentially apply for CDS grants next spring. That's my interpretation
That's
of
what
where I think
that's what they've
that
got.
they are.
Yeah, so I think we can cover that with them, and you know,
And I wanna just say, I've become so aware of how things need to regress. This water truck we have from 1984 is, when you talk, Chip, about what is the consequence if something doesn't work, well, if that water truck fails. That could be a major catastrophe for the island, and in order to get a new water truck, there needs to be a bay large enough to put it in. So a part of this process of the public safety building for the ambulances across the road with a bay that would fit that water truck. So in order to get a water truck, there needs to be a place to put it. And right now we have 5 vehicles in 3 bays and another vehicle outside in the tarp shed.
okay,
So,
well, I think
whatever.
we
I'm
shouldn't get
advocating.
into the weeds, but I
Yep.
do think, you know, I think there's support for a public safety building on the board's part, but the process, I think. And I would request that they submit a capital form for that request, and then the other thing is I want justification for the number. As people here have worked pretty hard to kind of nail down specific numbers, getting quotes from contractors and consultants. I would expect the same from the facilities committee, so, anyway, we can cover that with them. But Mark, you had something?
Just very quickly, I agree with you, Carol. I think the select board and the town administrator needs to get real clarification along with the facilities committee on what their expectations are. And if their expectations are a warrant that shows anything other than this $50,000 for this upcoming town meeting, You guys need to be aware of that, like John, I kinda heard that too. I also kind of strongly suggested at the last facilities committee, and I will be quick. That if housing of per diem EMT / paramedic for the mainland is a top priority, and I think it should be for that department in the community. Starting a building at 28 or 29, best scenario, in my opinion, is not solving that.
Correct, we had that conversation, so I
Thank you.
agree. So I think that's, but I'm a little concerned that the facilities committee feels they can drive the train, and it really has to be a collective decision. That's all.
Okay, so we have, the solar array funds can be reallocated. And that's money over and above the 808. So that money can go somewhere, and we haven't made a recommendation on that. And then if there are undesignated fund balance and the board accepts the finance committee's recommendation that those funds go to reserve accounts, they could go to a reserve account, and if you need tax relief, that, in my opinion, that could count in the 808. It would be better if it was additional funds.
And so tax relief, you mean, so is there a local tax?
No, I was just saying,
Oh,
if when you're, get the budget, it's a 6% tax increase.
You can use an unassigned fund balance like the town has done historically by putting it towards revenue to make.
No, I'm saying put it towards the reserve account,
And reduce the
but
amount we're
it
putting,
reduces the new money
Yeah.
that needs to be there, right?
the money we have to raise with taxes.
Yeah, so
That
instead
can
of
be done
putting
if the
$80,000,
tax increase is too high. If the tax increase is reasonable, keep piling that money in there.
Well, one thing, I don't know what you guys are thinking, it seems like an appropriate place to put the solar array money might be the facilities. Right, so,
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
so rolling that in there, to me, would sort of make sense.
Or would, you had previously mentioned that the stone wharf could use more funding. for possible-
Well, but I think from a kind of the taxpayer standpoint, sort of explaining like we're gonna dump this in. This was a facility related project and we opted to not purchase it. It makes sense to me to put it in facilities, even if we're just transferring money to, that 90,000 into a different account, just to kind of.
right. And
It's
then
sort
if-
of feels, just.
Yeah, and I think it would be good to make it clear that that 90/30 account can be used for new projects. And then if we consolidate 90/30 with some other things like, grant matching and storm damage repair and restoration, you get a fairly substantial pot of money that provides some flexibility for all these projects.
These,
Yeah, I mean, that has pros and cons, based
Oh,
on,
I know.
right, and I guess for me, storm damage and repair is sort of different than, I would. Yeah, we could talk about that. I think the solar array, it would be a good time to ditch that money and put it somewhere else. So this is a good moment to do that.
and you probably haven't had a chance to look at these consolidation things.
Yeah.
They're both in there. So if you consolidated that, it would all wind up in this new, 1070.
Yeah, but I do think that we need to explain to the public that we aren't using that money for the solar array and we're gonna reallocate it to facilities.
Right. Right, and then the second step in the warrants might be would hopefully be to consolidate. And we need to give the select board our recommendations on consolidation, just like we have on the use of the undesignated fund balance.
Yeah, these here is what we,
I know, but I think we need to write it up with some more detail, right?
Yeah.
And I guess,
The rationale behind it.
Those things,
Yeah, if you're gonna be asking the select board to bring something on a town warrant article, I know there's been a lot of discussions about it, but
Right,
the proper process would be kind of email for
A
us to
a
then put it on an
recommendation.
agenda item for them to make a decision that that's what's gonna go on the warrant.
right.
rationale,
Careful.
advantages, risk, possibly.
Yeah, we have, John did.
Yeah, I have that.
We have that.
And then slightly different subject is we're also gonna bring forward a recommendation for some local tax relief. And, we're gonna try to keep it simple, but that will come to the select board in the next week or two as a recommendation. And if we're gonna do that, we need funds somewhere in the budget. And I don't know what that line item would be.
It's in the budget or in a reserve fund?
Well, I don't know.
Okay,
Should be form a reserve fund for tax relief, I don't know what.
I don't know how do other towns do it, do you know, Ben, how they've done it?
Line item, but I don't think it's
Budget,
A budget line item, and you know, well, yeah, do you have a sense of the magnitude?
Well, we've talked about 20,000,
Yeah.
which would be about a 0.5% tax increase. You know, and that would be a maximum, and we see, I mean, but yeah, I think the big discussion was keep it simple and get something started, so.
And if that money isn't spent, it goes back into the undesignated fund.
Right, right.
And do you feel we'd have a system up and running in fiscal year 27 for people to access that?
No, I think it would actually be.
Building it
Well,
up,
thinking about it, they'd approve it now. And then they would have to apply next spring, so
okay,
it would be for fiscal year 28 taxes.
okay,
Is that right, Ben?
so you're not looking for any allocation?
Yeah, so we don't need a line
For
item,
this year.
we just need a warrant for it.
So that, we could have people applying for this coming year, but we don't know how many people take advantage of the state's tax assistance program. And that's the requirement for eligibility.
Yeah, it wouldn't be simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
okay.
And that would have no relation to general assistance, that would be separate.
Correct.
Right. And then I guess another question is, related to the storm damage repair and restoration, there's 126,000 in there now. We might put that 14.5 in there, we talked about putting that 14.5 in there, but, is that gonna be enough money?
No,
Cause, well, we're gonna bond the balance of South Shore Drive up. in Silver.
I thought
But, well, we're gonna bond that, but we also in the same timeframe, don't we need to do East Shore Drive by some FEMA end date?
Yes. Right now, the extensions for FEMA have been approved for the town through, basically the start of 2027, January of 2027. What the town has recently done is we've reached out to GEI, and East Shore Drive is one of the projects that we are asking them to start engaging us with, so then we can come up with a design and determine what the cost estimate would be to see what the money that we have, whether from FEMA, whether that could cover it. And then that would give us a better idea of what the cost of that project would be.
Okay, but we need to be comfortable, I guess, that the 126 that there's there now, plus the FEMA money will cover it, right? It's gonna have to be started in fiscal year 27.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah, and so I think excluding South Shore Drive, we are probably okay. There are two other parking projects that are coming out of that, right?
that, yeah, so with about 20,000 of that was allocated and a motion made by I think probably 2 select boards ago for work down at, by the hook. So money, if anything above $20,000 will need to be appropriated from the select board to cover the cost of that. And then, the idea was when, I believe it was last year at town meeting with the recommendation, maybe the year before, made to put money into that reserve account, Jenks Road and the parking design around whatever that would be. That the idea was money would come out of that reserve account to pay for that too. And we won't know what that costs until whether, we know whether it's gonna be, until it goes through the proper channels.
But probably between the two projects, $50,000 or $60,000 total for construction design and, in that
The
ballpark.
idea.
Okay, so then that would leave 75 for East Shore Drive.
Hard to know what that's gonna need. I think one of the things about storm damage is that, that could also be marine infrastructure based storm damage that seems to happen pretty regularly. We just did I don't know. I think, road damage, storm damage, I don't know. I think our strategy with the other, who knows, Pete and I haven't talked about this, but my thinking with the FEMA funds, other than South Shore Drive, is we're gonna try to keep the projects within the budget that FEMA has given us.
Correct.
So we
Right.
hope not to be pulling money out. South Shore Drive is kind of the unusual project, but the rest of them, like Waldo Point that we've talked about on the board, we're gonna spend what we got, not 3 times as much. And so I think that's, I don't anticipate we're gonna need a big chunk of change on that. And I don't think we have, but, I don't think we have any other projects that I know of right at the moment. I mean, we have the culvert work at Bennett's Cove. Where is that gonna come from?
Drainage and easements.
There is drainage and easements for the culvert work and then any other, actually,
It could be Bennett.
so there's about $22,000 that we have FEMA money for Bennett's Cove, so depending on what that looks like.
Could use
That
that.
could cover it.
And what about the drainage that needs to be done here?
That's FEMA unrelated.
That's on.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that is a number we should consider, whether we wanna add any, in the past, we've put a lot of money in there because we've had pretty big expenses, but maybe we won't see the January 24 storms again for a while.
We're fine on that.
And then the grant matching funds. We sort of. So one of the questions in my mind is, when does a project become its own fund, so to speak? And so a long time ago, we set up the Stormwater Fund and the town's been funding that for a decade. So at some point, the public safety building would go to its own project, I would assume. And so that would be something to think about is what stage does that become its own capital reserve fund? And then we're not, then those monies are coming in and out of that account only. So. And we're not putting any into. We think we have enough for the revow. And then, of course, the Cousins Island, we have a project to figure out what it might cost to do what we need to do over there, and so we'll know that. By the end of this calendar year or so, or this time next year, we'll have a sense of like, is that a $400,000 project or a $2 million project?
So, and the money that we pay to Yarmouth every year for that reserve fund, that's a line item in the budget. It's not a reserve account.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's probably not enough. Like, that's one of the things maybe that will come out of this project is we maybe need to ramp both sides, maybe need to ramp that up a little bit.
The money that goes into Yarmouth, is its own department that we have kind of listed, and it's based on an agreement that we have, and so we look at the agreement and the year, and they had allocated interest and stuff, and so it goes up 4% every year consistently, and that's the number. I plug in this and then we send them a check.
Yeah.
But all of that reserve account is only for the work, that is not connected to the Blanchard parking lot at all. There is no reserve for Blanchard parking lot.
But we technically don't have a reserve account for just the current war. I mean, Yarmouth is,
Yarmouth,
Town of Shipig writes a check every year to Yarmouth and sends it. Yarmouth holds on and keeps track of that reserve account.
and do you know the balance in there right now?
Last time it was like 750,000. Shebig contributes 80%, Yarmouth contributes 20%.
Quick question about the wharf over there. Will GEI be helping you with looking at that structure, or will it be another engineering firm in your opinion?
GEI is working on it, I think they probably would, but it's a pretty high level study, so I think it's gonna be. They're gonna look at it, I think they're gonna give us some pretty ballpark costs, but I think that's still gonna get us. Further down the road than where we were.
Yeah.
And the cost before that we got from the Yarmouth engineer was 250,000 or something like that. 250 to 300,000 to do repairs.
No sea level rise incorporation.
And I won't waste my time on this, but I'm hoping that when we see a projected design / rough cut, that it includes some sort of accommodation for a longer, wider ramp.
Yeah, no, that's in there, yeah,
Thank you.
all right, well, I think we've,
That's all we have.
good. Good.
I have one more question if I may.
Yeah.
Will there be a determination or a statement of the current undesignated fund balance number at some point soon? And then will the select board consider any of those possible available extra funds?
Yeah, I think so, I mean,
When would that happen?
So I did kind of preliminary estimates today. And so the town, and I did it once, so don't hold me to these numbers, because I definitely didn't have time to double check it. So after the work that Mark Roy did, and then he met with the school and updated that information. Our balance for undesignated fund balance was 739,560, which seemed good. Higher than we thought it was going to be.
this was at the end of fiscal year 25.
Yeah, actually, there are some changes with the school that ended up helping and bumping it up a little bit. Then we had special town meeting where we ate $61,000 of that. And so, with, rough numbers that I did today, which, based on how I learned it with calculating the numbers, there are several things that you kind of have to pull out of it. Where that left us was, where is my percentage? With the balance of about 678,000, which 16% of, once the numbers, if I pulled out the right ones, 16% was gonna bring us to about 578,000 and change, and then, the upper 25% was gonna be 900,000. And so,
That 16 to 25% is only on the municipal.
Town policy.
Right,
Correct?
correct. The state is, we are, higher in terms of. No, I'd have to double check, I don't remember right
Okay,
now, I'm
thank you for that.
confusing myself. Yeah, so what, then looking at the numbers that we had, if you take and bring it to the lower number of closer to 60%, we had about $99,000 to work with.
so,
I don't want the board to get me wrong. I'm not a big spender, I think you remember when I was on the board, I was pretty cheap.
Yeah.
But
No, I think that's,
if there's extra money, instead of softening the blow,
I agree.
and we can take the blow.
Well, and for example, the tax, it would make a lot of sense to have a reserve account. Well, I guess we're saying it's a regular account, yeah. Yeah, I think we're all on the same page there and what that number is, we can see at the end. I think it should be a lot, you should have a much more accurate number as we get closer to town meeting. I think one of the challenges right now is we're still waiting on, the South Shore Drive differential number. And,
Yeah,
we'll have to see with that. And I think we have pretty good numbers on the stone wharf, except for, the parking, but we can even get a range on that.
yeah, and I'll be quick again, but at some point I would be curious to hear/see what Pownell's policy was on, if it's $300,000 or more, it makes more sense to bond it. How does that work? Because, that makes some sense to me on bigger ticket items, because like Chip said, if you try to save for everything, you just couldn't put enough money.
Right, but some of these things, I think in particular, they're really, the things with a lot of longevity make sense to bond. But like the fire department boat, if we went that route, I saw someone had recently purchased one and they were only able to get a 10-year bond.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have a very long lifespan.
And in my opinion, the reason we didn't bond out the road paving, in my not so humble opinion, we had a lot of debt right out of the gates, first of all, when we seceded from Cumberland. Second of all, a lot of the roads weren't ready to surface because of culvert and drainage problem.
Yeah.
That's simple.
All right, so I think from a capital standpoint, does the board have any more questions? Anybody else? I think we do have a couple things we should go over on the operational budget, just at least speak this memo, and you guys feel free to stay, but don't feel like you gotta either. So I think before you leave though, it seems like we're still a work in progress here, but we've got a number that we're working with that we can think about how to distribute. You've made your recommendations. And then, we'll get some more, we'll think about, what the best way, if we want to make any changes to those distributions. And, but the number, I don't think we'd want to change, the 808 or whatever it is, 805. That would be my guess, but I do think we maybe should spend some time prioritizing this blue box.
You guys should.
Yeah.
Yeah. When's the next regular select board meeting where we could get on the agenda with the 2 or 3 recommendations we have? I think you meet every Wednesday for the next 3 Wednesdays.
So the next select board meeting is April 1st, which is a week from today, which, we're pretty much shaping up with a pretty heavy, agenda, but if you submit anything
We could do it.
by
Well, I submitted a
tomorrow.
recommendation for,
The undesignated fund balance
That's
will be
there.
on, yep, that will be on the next agenda, so if there is anything else.
Just send it to me.
Just send it to me and then we'll finalize it with, as long as I have any of the paperwork by Friday. Then I can ensure that it gets in the
But then it's
packet.
2 weeks after that, is that a regular meeting?
The 15th is the next regular meeting, yeah, so the 8th is technically the 4th budget draft, which.
The
The 8th of April,
April.
but, is the
Why?
next budget discussion. That's supposed to be the 4th budget draft, and then, after that, the select board doesn't have, a budget discussion until they're reviewing on May 6th. Put together warrant and kind of reviewing everything in its entirety.
So will we have an updated budget from the school by the 8th?
I hope so, because they have a meeting coming up, but that's something that, I was gonna follow up prior to that meeting, just because I wanna try to incorporate as much of a final figure for you as I can.
All right, well, that's helpful. It feels like we're not just pulling numbers out of the air, like we have been.
When I think about as a novice select board person, the experience of a year ago before we had these numbers, it's night and day. Thank you
Yeah.
for so much.
Yeah, we think it's better. But there's more work to do.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah. Making a difference.
All right, so I think what we should move on to is, and there's a few things we should discuss about the operational budget, and Vika sent a memo with the updated budget. And, you know, right now, I mean, one of the things she was gonna report on is this, where we are in terms of, and this will change just based on our discussion tonight, but just what kind of budget increase are we looking at? You know, so that, right now, do you wanna start with that, Vika, or do you wanna go through the changes?
Whatever your preference is.
Oh, I want to hear the budget increase.
All right, so start there.
Okay, so let me pull that up then. So with where things are right now, hold on, I'm not ready. Look at this document. All right. So right now, the budget, in its entirety is, about a 3.7% increase from fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 27. And that includes, an additional $15,000 addition to the budget that's not in your current budget report based on a recommendation for contracted services for admin.
So probably close to 4, right?
I'm sorry?
So a little, like, it would still be below 4%.
So without the 15%, the $15,000, the budget is at 3.44%.
Oh.
The $15,000 that is not reflected in what I sent you, puts us at 3.7.
Okay, so that's the word.
So the budget is, it's below 4%, which last year this time, it was about, like a 6-7%.
Right.
And the board was asking me to go back and cut it back by 1%, so.
That number you're looking at, is that on page 35?
No. Page 35 says 3.2%.
Right, and then you made the $15,000 adjustment to that or someplace else?
Oh, no, so I have a document in front of me where I extracted it
Okay.
into Excel because Trio does not allow me to play with numbers in any clever fashion. Once I change a number, I plug it in and then I have to regenerate a report. So this is something I have with all of this data inputted in here. So.
And
So, I had a question relative to tax increase. If you look on page 36. There's a tax commitment line.
Yep.
And so that's the line that's important to figure out how much your taxes are gonna change.
Yep.
And so currently it says that this year we had to raise from tax for 26, we had to raise from taxes 3,697,000. And there's a number in there now of 3,945,000. I don't know where that number came from.
I put it there.
Well, I figured that, but If you add that number, so then you go to the last page. And it has a revenue total of 4,550,000. Is that the expense total?
So you can't, so I'm gonna. The revenue information under this budget isn't 100% in its entirety with the tax commitment number. I plugged that in to try to round me back up to what the total budget is going to be. What the total budget we're looking for proposed for fiscal year 27 is I'm gonna double check to make sure it's 4,575.
Okay,
738.
yeah,
So what we had to do is, because Trio prints the numbers for actuals and budgeted based on when we commit and upload the tax information in, and then for the budget numbers, they're not changeable on our end. So with all of the work that Mark has done, I've had to extract it into Excel document, and with Andrew's help, had to modify some of those numbers. So then that way the fiscal year 25 budgeted and actuals are more reflected. And all of that in time as we improve the system will be more accurately. So what I'm looking at is the fiscal year 26 and 27 numbers extracted into a different document in front of me.
So did you include revenues when you calculated the increase in the budget, or were you using just expenses?
So what I did is I included the revenues, but what I'm not including is the comparison of using last year's budgeted 26 tax commitment and a difference to what I have for the number in there.
So you're assuming that it's a flat tax commitment?
It's not gonna be a flat tax commitment. What I'm just saying is right now for this document, don't use that. The tax commitment is gonna be 3.9 million
What line?
for net to be raised.
yeah, and I guess I can't see that math looking
Right,
at the third draft of the budget. That's
right. Right,
and that's,
so maybe that's a question. It would be good to have a report that we could really. So you're kind of having to plug in a number to match it's kind of masking kind of the real information.
that's what I had to do this week from our discussion with Mark on Monday, and then to kind of try to get the closest. Andrew helped me a little bit on Tuesday, kind of create this document. He was out today. I do have it uploaded into where you all have access to it. And so once he comes back tomorrow and we clean it up a little bit more streamlined with the discussions tonight, then what I'll do is I'll email you, share you where it's linked so you can see it.
But you could share it with them,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So, and that would be a little bit easier to follow in terms of real expenses, real numbers, right? Okay.
I mean, the challenges for fiscal year 25, those numbers are the numbers that are going to be the biggest change on the actuals on this document.
Right.
Fiscal year 26 isn't gonna be any different because that's kind of what we're comparing to. Current year is fiscal year 26 versus proposed. It's kind of the undesignated fund and a lot of those other numbers that I have to subtract or calculate to get me to try to calculate the mill rate in those numbers.
But one of the things is the past several years, we put in 200 to 150,000 of undesignated funds. The budget we're looking at now does not include that.
And that was a big point that
So that's actually a pretty good outcome if we're in the 3.7
Yeah, well, so looking at that, if that 3.9 is right, it kind of makes sense, because it's the increase in expenses, actual, and then the loss of
50,000.
150,000 in revenue, so that's the 300.
And you're not using 100 to 150 yet,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
What did, we explain that again?
Right here. So like this, the past several years, we've put.
Oh, for tax rate.
Right, so we've
Yeah.
reduced the,
Tax
we've
rate.
added revenue from the undesignated
Yeah.
fund. We're not doing that in 2027, and so when you look at the
The
differential.
mill rate change is going to be higher as a result of it though, because what you're gonna be doing is inevitably you are going to be asking to raise more by taxes that you have before, because you weren't taking 100, 175, or 200 from the undesignated fund and putting it to revenue.
Right.
right, you could still do that, but,
But the current budget doesn't reflect that, and I think
yeah,
it's good that it's under 4%. Cause you're not, if you were at 6, 7% for the entire budget, then you wouldn't even have the ability really to pull money from undesignated fund right now.
And
Cause there's
potentially,
nothing up there.
if we could take money from the undesignated fund and put it in the reserve accounts, which could, if we just wanted to keep it at 7, whatever, we could lower our contribution.
So right now for so if you're gonna follow the process of using undesignated fund balance into a reserve account, let's say you're gonna, so right now the number I came up was 99,000 and change.
Right.
I wouldn't even be comfortable to making of that recommendation, but let's say you're gonna ultimately use $90,000 of undesignated fund balance. Historically, it would go to revenue to make it so then you're asking less for a tax commitment. What you would do in this case is the $800,000 number, you would decrease one of the reserve line items for appropriation by $90,000.
Right.
And what you would do is you would have a warrant article saying using undesignated fund balance of $90,000 and move it into X account, reserve account. So you're not raising that $90,000 by taxes.
Right.
You're taking it from the surplus and putting it into
So
into that.
if it's in addition, then it doesn't change, it doesn't improve the tax rate, or the tax rate stays like it is, but if we did it, and then reduce the total reserve,
right,
it's a wash.
yeah, which you might have to get
Right,
to the number you're talking with, but.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do think that is easier for people also to follow where the money's going. And it makes the expenditures, and to me, instead of
Yes.
adding this little buffer that kind of,
Right.
it's
Right,
like your
but-
dad gave you some money and, you're thinking, well, so I could pay the rent, but no, actually dad gave me 500,
Right. So do we start with taking a look at, as we've talked about in the past, what tax increase we're comfortable with? Do we start there, or is that one of
Well, once we get kind of nailed down, we can go through the tax calculation sheet and get a handle on what,
how it's impacted?
what.
I
the
did
tax
it,
rate
I
might
did
be.
it, I did it roughly today with the numbers that we're working with right now. And so, right now, the number is, so we're at 11.2. And the number that I came up with today from mill rate would be about 12 to 12.6.
Which doesn't mean a lot to me.
Well,
So
you
what
gotta,
that means is, what does that translate to?
that's on, it's basically,
So 11.2 and going up to 12.6, that means that it's per $1,000 is the assessed value. And so what you're looking at is you're looking at the difference of that. So for, that means the tax increase is from $1,120 to $1,260, 12.6, 11.2.
Yeah.
And so if you're averaging a $5,000 home, you are looking, your taxes going up from $5,600 to 63, which is an increase of $700.
Yeah, but that's an 11% tax increase.
Yeah,
If the millage goes from 11.2 to 12.6, is that what you said?
yeah, that is bigger than
That's an 11% tax increase. I don't see that in the numbers.
I don't
this
either.
budget so far, so.
So, and
Well, and that's,
Hopefully there's, we're
But
not
that-
holding you to it.
please
Right.
don't, because this was,
Right.
I tried my best to create this as quickly as possible, but
but that is really where the rubber meets the road in terms of understanding a tax increase is trying to do that calculation. So I think it would be good to,
Yeah, but I think you can see the number very directly in the
on page.
budget on page 36.
Right,
I think the tax commitment line. If the new number is right and you compare that to the previous number, right now it shows a 6.7% increase.
right.
If those numbers were right, that would be the tax increase I would expect. Because
So.
that number to be raised by real estate tax is what flows to the bottom of the tax commitment sheet.
Yep.
To calculate the millage.
But the valuation, so even if nothing changes, but the valuation goes up. Right, of the real estate, that's gonna generate additional tax revenue, right? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, if you have if you had no new homes, right?
Right,
If everybody's home, all the homes were the same, even if the valuation changed. The millage would change,
right,
but. You'd still end up with a. Percentage tax increase by whatever the additional dollars that needed to be raised by real estate taxes was.
but one of the things that's benefited us. And that since the pandemic is the increase in valuation. That's been going up. Right, and so for the same amount of. Incremental tax increase, the valuation has been higher, so in other words, as the town's valuation increases. If everything else stayed the same, our mill rate would go down.
Right,
So what's happening, even if our mill rate is increasing, we've sort of been benefiting from this increased valuation.
well, the only thing you don't see here, by just compare those two numbers on the tax commitment.
Yeah.
Is, what the total valuation is of the real estate.
Right,
For example, if 3 houses got built or $1.2 million each, then the value of the real estate went from 330 million to 333 million. So
but what
that changes it by 1% or half.
well, but I think our assessor was also adjusting across the board, wasn't she increasing the valuation?
with Jackie, I recall she did something like that, and then the current assessor. They seem to not entirely agree with how she had done it.
Cause she was bumping it up a fair amount every year, 8 or 10%.
Across the board, everybody?
Across the board,
Yeah.
because the real estate values were going crazy, so I mean, I think it wasn't a bad thing to do. But I think the new assessors are not adjusting that way, but anyway, we'll see. So
Yeah, at
mill
the
rate,
end of the day, everybody should look at the sheet that the
Right.
tax assessor uses to see
On,
but
what
I,
the increase is.
but-
that's the sheet that I used, and then there isn't a change in, right now with the valuation for real estate because they haven't entered anything new, and they don't wanna keep working with us, and so we're actively looking for another one, and so this might be a year where that valuation number might not change a whole lot if we don't have an assessor who's actively inputting all of the new changes in the last several months to make that number go up.
But the easiest way to tell the story of the tax increase is just to leave set aside valuations and all that, because they can change and maybe they're gonna add new property. Is back on the budget sheet as you go, as you're doing, saying, last year we spent this year we're spending that.
I agree, but when it comes to a tax increase, if the valuation is increasing as it has been on Shabby, then that translates into a lower tax increase, correct?
Lower millage.
Lower millage.
Yeah, and if
Lower
everybody
millage,
goes
but
up,
the tax then is still be, the taxes could still be going up with a lower millage.
yeah, it's, if everybody goes up 3%.
If the millage comes down 5%, but your valuation goes up 10,
Right,
you can end up paying more dollars.
You're right.
Yeah.
But I think the perception has been, you know, if the mill, yeah, I get what you're saying. So,
it's a simple number they can find on the town website.
I use that number.
Yeah.
But it's not, it has to be very live and active with the work that the assessor doing in the assessing part of Trio to provide that number for us. It's not, the state releases them every couple of years, but that's not what the assessors use ultimately. It's more of a live number within the system that they use when they commit the taxes. So it does have an impact. Based on what they input.
yeah, so we can wait till we have the reval and then we can all,
What's the timeline for that? Do we have a timeline for the reevaluation yet?
We put out an RFP
It went out.
several months ago. We had no biters. I have spoken to Cumberland County twice, one of them being this week. And Cumberland County, I send them the information for a reval and assessor, and they're gonna disperse it with whatever means they have to try to help us
Okay.
to find somebody.
and speaking of, do you have an updated Cumberland County cost yet?
I reached out and I talked to him today. I got an updated number in terms of what it would be for the whole year, which is a small couple $1,000 increase. And it does look like right now, we will get a share of 50-50 with Long Island, but until a sheriff arrives that second week in May, they can't firmly guarantee that.
Okay.
So,
In terms, just so we can call it a night here soon, so in terms of the actual operational budget, there are a couple outstanding items that we should cover. We don't necessarily make decisions tonight, but so we just talked about the budget percentage increase. So then the other thing is, Vika in her memo mentioned contracted services, and that is for, we brought this up at a meeting we had this week. So Mark Roy has been helping us, modify our accounts and, developing systems. And so I think we should put in some money for contracted services. This is on the higher end of what he thought he might need, but I think that's what I recommend is 15,000. That's what, he said 10 to 15, right? But
Yes.
if you remember, we had to appropriate extra money at the special town meeting to cover his costs. And I think he's been money well spent. That's my perspective. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that. We don't, I think that's based on what he has been doing so far. That's what he suggested.
And given the fact that we're looking at so many complex expenditures, I would support that.
Yeah, well, it's partly if we'll get into these federal grants and
Yeah.
it's challenging. The other part though is I think maybe setting up some reports and systems so that you can get what you need and that the trio has limitations, but I understand from Mark, he can prepare reports. He's pretty good at that. So I think going that extra step to get some customized reports that can answer some of these questions, and it might be that the finance committee has some they want. So anyway, so you haven't got that in the budget yet, right?
I don't have it on this, no, I plugged it in on, my end with the document that I've been working with. And it has a small, that's what I said earlier, it went from like 3.4 to
Yeah.
3.7%.
So Richard, what are your thoughts on that? On adding some extra funding for basically financial services?
Yeah.
What line is that?
Well,
It would go under admin contracted services.
all right,
No,
David.
yeah, I agree, it's a necessary, cost of doing business, really.
And then the next thing is the fire department, and Vika sent the latest information that we have on the operational budget from the fire department. And there's still some unknowns, I guess is what I would say, right? On that.
Correct. The information that you have is the most current that I have, and I think the biggest thing in the document that was shared with you is there are still some outstanding questions that they don't know about relative to overnight accommodations and per diem costs. So that would be the big thing in there that not knowing how that could impact or change the budget.
And then the other thing that was a pretty significant increase in the operational budget was the lights. So, and that came up just recently, so I think we've got it in there, but we kind of need to know where it's, where the number comes from.
Yeah, the fire department has been asked to provide a breakdown of what goes into equipment maintenance and building maintenance. And equipment maintenance is the one that, if you could see over the last couple of years, has significantly spiked in terms of its needs. And in the town office, it's become difficult to figure out what is become a regular annual maintenance and needs. So that's something that we're still trying to get some clarified information for.
Yeah, because that's a big number. So I think we're not, and then the other thing is an additional 5,000 for a stipend, 5,000 increase in the fire chief stipend, right?
Correct.
And I was under the impression that the stipend for the fire chief was higher than what it actually is, was higher than 10,000. I didn't realize the stipend includes 1,000 for each of the 5 officers.
No, the 10,000 is just the fire chief stipend. This is
Right.
an additional 5,000
Right.
just for the fire chief.
What I'm saying is, I didn't realize what his stipend was. I thought it was more than that, actually. So, this is good information, because we didn't have that kind of detail last year.
The select board?
I don't remember having this breakdown last year. Did we?
I don't know.
I don't think
I
so.
don't think Ralph asked for the increase
We didn't.
last year.
2024 fiscal year is when the stipend was increased to 10%.
Right.
So that was,
So the fire chief stipend is 10,000.
10,000.
He's asked for another 15,000. The additional in the 26,300 is for the other supervisory stipends.
And all of the volunteers get an hourly wage when they go on call or the time they give to the department. The stipends are on top of that.
I think it's 2 points. And
It
it's,
varies for everyone depending on their status and how long they've been there. Some get 240, some, and it also something that they've changed in the last couple of years. So it's based on how much they're giving back to. So
I've
some
seen
of them
that.
start
I've
at
seen that.
240, some of them are up to 2,000, and then the fire chief is at 10.
But one thing to keep in mind, and it's not like I don't agree with the process, the numbers, but technically, they can't just raise the salaries. That has to come through the select board.
Right.
So, I mean, that needs to be communicated clearly to us, so we know that that's what, so I think that at some point, we need to kind of nail that down a little bit better.
because it's not entirely transparent to everybody in the department.
Well, it's not even transparent to me on the select board, so I did not know that was happening, and it's our job to be in the know. So I'm not saying I have a problem with it, but they don't really have the authority to increase people's salaries without board approval.
So, and you're saying that's what you're saying that's what they have been doing.
Well, they've changed their system of allocating payment, and it's probably fine, but it just isn't, they're not an independent department. So, yeah. And of course, so I think anything else on the operational budget so fire department we don't know.
Fire department, I did ask the fire chief and, if that's the most accurate, if that's the case, then that information is already reflected in this budget. With the school board, it is the information that's is their first draft, so you might see some changes from them. My plan is to try to get something from Aaron before the next select board budget discussion. And then the only other really big ticket thing that the board will have as an agenda item for a discussion next week is the harbor master position, which this budget is the first budget that is reflecting the department in line, close related to what it was in previous years. And that's because I had made the recommendation to increase it due to the needs, because it has been decreased the last couple of years.
So sort of to restore it. right?
Yes,
But the amount is already in the budget.
what I did is I put in $30,000.
Yep.
Because that's kind of closely reflected to what the number would be. Once the select board decides next week what you wanna do and how you wanna move, then what I'll do is I will adjust that number. It might change by $100.
How would the job description change?
The job description is not gonna change, but that will be an agenda item for you to look at next week.
And then, in terms of the school, you did figure out what the operational budget increase was separate from, so the school debt service is going down, so overall the budget is going down, but if you take out the debt service.
They were increasing by a
increasing.
little over 3%. Let me pull that back up.
They went up 40,000.
40, yeah, so on the order of 40 something thousand. And right now, we have a 4% cost of living increase built in. Which we can adjust if we,
It's, the school is 3.84%, $45,251. Their budget is increasing.
some of which is probably just salary increases and health insurance, I don't know, we can, that's. And last year, we did ask them to pull that out separately from the overall budget, so people understood that the debt service was kind of masking that at the bottom line. So, anything else for tonight? So we have a meeting, is that right? We have a meeting every Wednesday.
We have a select board meeting next Wednesday, the following Wednesday is the fourth budget draft. And then the following Wednesday is a regular budget,
Okay,
regular
Regular
meeting,
meeting.
and then there's like a 3-week break. because of the way,
people's vacations.
the way that the weeks stagger, so.
All right, so I
And then
think,
there'll be approval of the warrant.
okay. So I think for us, we need to get a couple of these things answered. We could come plug in after the meeting next week. We can try to finalize at least the operational budget. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
And then the capital budget. I think we'll need to maybe have another discussion about that, and I think Earhart should be here, and. I would ask, I made some comments about the facilities committee, but this is not an official board meeting, so do not. Transmit that information to the facilities committee, because it's, we're not deciding anything as a board, I'm just providing my comments, but I do think. It may be some direction we want to give the facilities committee.
And there's a meeting Thursday.
They're meeting this week, yeah, and I personally just think we need more, backup. And, I do, I think we could clarify, if people are comfortable, Vika can clarify the process of kind of developing warrant articles. They do not come out of a committee. Committees can make recommendations for things they want to do, but the warrant articles come from here.
Selectboard, correct.
And I feel like they're just a little bit ahead of themselves at the moment. And I also think one thing is, we learned also, better to be prepared and fully be able to present to the community than to kind of assume that you have buy-in and then, fail, which is sort of what happened last time. Not, I wouldn't say any fault of theirs, but, okay,
Done.
yeah, I think
Right.
so.